Hey there guys, how's it going? Welcome back to my movie review series. So, basically I've been in the mood lately to do some random movie reviews and review some movies that I'd never heard of before. And I was recently in the pound shop and I was looking for some movies in the DVD section because occasionally the pound shop will have some obscure movies that either never made it to cinema or never made it mainstream, and movies that you've never heard of. And occasionally you'll find movies that are rare gems, movies that are pretty good that went under the radar, and it's fun to just pick out a few movies. I mean, you can get them very cheap, just £1 each, and yeah, I picked up a few movies that I'd never heard of before, and this movie was among them. So let's talk about it. So I'm going to be reviewing several movies, movies that I'd seen for the first time and movies that I just picked out, just randomly out of the blue. So this movie stars Nicolas Cage. It's called Dying of the Light. It was released, I believe, in 2014, if I remember rightly. I think this was a 2014 movie. Again, this is a movie I'd never heard of, and never heard of this movie before. I'd never seen any trailers. I knew nothing about it. I went and watched the movie completely just out of left field with no knowledge on it whatsoever, and the main reason why I decided to choose to pick this movie up is because, as the cover of the movie suggested, it stars Nicolas Cage. Now, say what you want about Nicolas Cage, and I know the guy's batshit crazy, I get it, but Nicolas Cage, whether you like the guy or not, I've always found him entertaining as an actor. Like, even when he's in a really bad movie, or even when he's in a mediocre movie, I just think that he's one of these actors who always gives it 110% to his performance. I mean, the guy is genuinely entertaining and has a kind of on-screen presence which is very, very rare. Few actors have that sort of on-screen charisma that he has, and no matter what sort of script he's given or whatever movie he's given, he always gives it a great performance, and he's always very entertaining to watch and charismatic. So I knew that this was going to be somewhat entertaining. Now, the movie's essentially about Nicolas Cage, who plays as a CIA agent. He's essentially a CIA veteran, and in the beginning of the movie he's kidnapped by a terrorist group while he's out on a mission, and he gets the shit beaten out of him, basically gets tortured, gets interrogated, and as a result of that, because of the blows he took to the head during his interrogation, he was basically, he had a lot of damage, a lot of lasting brain damage. And the movie then does sort of a time jump. It jumps to like 20 odd years in the future, and in the future Nicolas Cage is still dealing with the ramifications of the interrogation. He's dealing with the early stages of dementia, so yeah, he's starting to forget things, he's starting to lose his mind essentially, and he figures out that he doesn't have a lot of time left, and he gets some information from one of his friends at the CIA, one of his young proteges played by Anton. Yelchin. He gets some information that the terrorist who kidnapped him in the beginning of the movie years earlier has resurfaced, because this terrorist was sort of believed to be dead, and Nicolas Cage always insisted that he was alive, although he could never prove it to his superiors, and because he was starting to lose his mind a bit and he was suffering from the early stages of dementia, they believed that the terrorist was dead. But Nicolas Cage finds out that he might actually be alive, so he basically sets out on a revenge mission to find and expose this terrorist, who's sort of his arch nemesis at this point. And it's an interesting enough plot. What I will say is, though, before I go any further, and this is something that just baffled me when I saw it, I went online after watching this movie to see how this movie was viewed critically, by mainstream critics and whatnot. And I saw from Rotten Tomatoes and IMDb and all these other sites, this movie got absolutely roasted. This movie got, I think, 8% on Rotten Tomatoes, and I just have to say right now, before I go any further, that score is absurd. 8%, really? I mean, again, Rotten Tomatoes and these mainstream critics, I think that they're so much harder on these types of movies. When it comes to independent movies like this, they're so much harder on them than they are on big budget movies, and I've got to be honest, man, while this may not be the best movie, to call this an 8%, rotten garbage movie is just straight up disingenuous. And it's ridiculous, if I'm being honest, because this movie isn't that bad. I'm not saying that it's a masterpiece or anything like that, but as a generic sort of revenge thriller, it's really not that bad. For example, the movie has some pretty good and pretty realistic practical effects. Now, there's not a whole lot of action in the movie, but what I will say is that the action that is there is very, very well filmed. You know, there's no, obsessive shaky cam. There's some practical squibs, practical gore. It's quite bloody, it's quite violent, it's quite realistic. It's a movie that realistically portrays that sort of violence and, how sort of non-glamorous and dangerous that whole espionage type thing is. It's a movie, it's not very politically correct, compared to most movies around about the time. I'm not saying it's like a proper like hard right or anything like that, but it's definitely not like a PC like baby type movie. No, this movie's rated 18. It's a movie that's quite hard hitting, and I just think it was quite well made. Like I said, there's no CGI. It's all like practical effects, practical squibs, practical stunt work, and it's a pretty well made, competently filmed movie if I'm being honest. Where the movie falls apart though is in its overall plot. Like I said, it's generic. It's a generic spy revenge thriller which we've really seen before. So there's not like there's anything in this movie that's really breathtaking or subvertive or anything like that. We've seen movies like this time and time again. It's again with a CIA agent trying to hunt down a terrorist. I mean, I swear it's as generic a plot as you can come across. There's not really any standout acting performances in the movie other than Nicolas Cage, and I mean, Nicolas Cage is fantastic whatever he's in. The guy's just a very, very talented actor, and without him, I gotta say this movie probably would have no credibility, because even though it's a well-made movie, most of the acting performances are just bland and repetitive and really uninspired. That's what I will say. It's not really an inspired movie. So in terms of the writing and the plot, it's not as interesting as it could have been. I mean, it's quite, like I say, quite generic. But not only that, it's a little bit poorly paced too. There are some unnecessary scenes that felt like pure padding and filler, which it didn't really need. It could have dealt with a little bit more. I think it could have done with a little bit more action, if I'm being honest. A couple more action scenes, because the action scenes that are there are very good. One of the things I did like about the movie is how Nicolas Cage sort of has this on edge, like uneasy performance, because he's dealing with this dementia, so he's forgetting things, and while he's trying to find this terrorist and while he's trying to use his brain, you can tell he's really struggling with it. And I think that Nicolas Cage, his acting performance in the movie really did lend credibility to that sort of role, and the way that he sort of was just constantly on edge the whole movie and constantly vulnerable the whole movie, and I think he did a great job with that. There's also quite an interesting, intense confrontation towards the end of the movie between Nicolas Cage and the terrorist who he's pursuing, who has some problems of his own, which I won't get into, but I thought that the acting there and the cinematography and everything was pretty good. Other than that, I don't really think there's anything else to say about this movie, but it was a decent enough watch. This is one of them movies that you would see on TV in the afternoon, and you'd watch it like afternoon to late night, and you'd watch it and you'd just think, oh, that was alright. It was a decent watch. It's not a movie that I say is very it's not like a big blockbuster. This is not a movie that I would go and see in the cinema. It's more just a TV movie, if you know what I mean. It's a movie that I think is quite generic, and it's just a by the numbers generic spy movie basically. And like I said, it's a well-made movie. It's got good action scenes. It's got good acting from its lead role in Nicolas Cage, and it's got some good dialogue, but it's also a little bit poorly paced. And to me, it's just a movie that it's just average. I wouldn't say it's really below average. I wouldn't really say it's above average. I'd give this movie a 5 out of 10. So straight down the middle. I could maybe go down to a 4 out of 10, just based on the fact that there was a few scenes that could have been cut out. But to me, it's a movie I don't have a problem with. It's a movie that I think is watchable, and it's somewhat entertaining, but it's not a movie that I'm in a rush to see again anytime soon. So that's pretty much how I see this one, man. 5 out of 10. Yeah, I really got nothing else to say about it. This is just a quick movie review, one of my quickest. So yeah, 5 out of 10. Check this one out if you see it for very cheap in the shop. If not, you can just skip over it. I've got more movie reviews coming couple more movies that I saw, which I'd seen for the first time, and movies that I'd seen just completely out of nowhere that were a lot better than this. But I don't think this is anywhere near as bad as the critics made it out to be. I mean, come on, 8%. You know, while you got movies on Rotten Tomatoes like The Festival that get like 90%, you know, 85 or whatever that movie got. You know, one of the biggest pieces of shit in cinematic history. But this one gets 8%. I find that a little bit disingenuous. So that's all I got to say about this one. I give it a 5. Let me know what you guys think. Thanks for watching, and yeah, God bless, and stay tuned for more movie reviews.